Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Beyond the Veil, a class where we are considering the tabernacle, the temple, and the glorious presence of God. Today, we're in lesson 13, and we look at the temple, the house for the name of the Lord. So, for nearly 500 years, the tabernacle served as a place for the Lord to dwell in the midst of his people. It was a place for his people to come and render their service, their worship, to offer their sacrifices to the Lord. Well, something changed. Something amazing changed during the reign of King Solomon. It was during these days that he sought and worked and completed building a physical structure, a physical dwelling place for the Lord among his people. Second Samuel chapter 7 tells us a story about how his father, King David, tried to do so. He sought to build a house for the Lord, a temple for the Lord, and was not able to do so, being labeled as a man of bloodshed. But that didn't stop David from getting his son Solomon ready and prepared. And so in the book of First Chronicles 22 and verse 5, it says, David said, My son Solomon is young and inexperienced, and the house that is to be built for the Lord shall be exceedingly magnificent, famous and glorious throughout all the lands. Therefore, now I will make preparation for it. So David made ample preparations before his death. And so he did. He not only secured the money and a contribution, a gathering of wealth, he gathered materials. He inspired the workers to have the same vision of a magnificent building. And so David made great preparations for this temple to be built, so that when he died and Solomon took the throne, Solomon came with the same mentality, and that was the house that I am to build for the Lord will be great, for our God is greater than our gods. The reason this temple will be great is because God is great. And so he came in with the expectation that this isn't the tent anymore. This isn't the tabernacle. This is the temple. And we are going to make sure that this temple represents just how great and magnificent and amazing our God is. And that was exactly what Solomon set out to achieve. In 1 Kings chapter 5, it describes the worthy attempt to build a house for the name of the Lord. And so it says in 1 Kings 5 and verse 13, King Solomon drafted forced labor out of all of Israel, and the draft numbered 30,000 men. And he sent them to Lebanon, 10,000 a month in shifts. Solomon also had 70,000 burden bearers and 80,000 stonecutters in the hill country, besides Solomon's 3,300 chief officers who were over the work, who had charge of the people, who carried on the work. At the king's command, they quarried out great costly stones in order to lay the foundation of the house with dressed stones. He got an amazing team, a large number of workers. They had it in their minds that they are going to build this house and build it well, not just in terms of the quality and as good workers doing good work, but even the materials were going to be solid quality materials. It took 7 years to construct this temple, to build the house of the Lord from 967 to 960 BC. But the temple itself, not including the surrounding chambers, it was 90 feet long, 30 feet wide. It was twice the dimensions of the tabernacle. It was 45 feet high. Can you even imagine that? 45 feet high. How this would have stood out among all the buildings in Jerusalem. The two 40-foot bronze pillars were at the entrance. They were named Boaz and Jachin. They were with capitals are on top. Each were decorated with 200 imitation pomegranates. A vestibule 30 feet wide and 15 feet deep was built. There were two folding doors of cypress wood on doorposts of olive wood leading from the vestibule into the holy place, the first room. Carved into the doors were cherubim, palm trees, open flowers. Again, takes us back to that imagery of garden. You see growth, you see beauty, you see trees, you see cherubim. The first room, and some versions will say the nave or the holy place, It was 60 feet long and 30 feet wide and 45 feet high. The walls were lined with boards of cedar carved in the form of gourds and open flowers. 1 Kings 6 verse 18 says, all was cedar, no stone was seen. It says verse 21 that Solomon overlaid the inside of the house with pure gold. Can you imagine that? All these walls inside this holy place built with cedar and the cedar covering, but then they were overlaid with pure gold. I would have just shone inside this room. The holy room contained the golden altar of incense, the golden table for the bread of presence, and 10 golden lampstands, 5 on the north side and 5 on the south side, as you see depicted here. The 2 doors of olive wood carved with the cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers, it was the opening to the holy place, into the temple itself. And so those 2, as you see on our screen, those 2 yellow doors are what opened up into the temple. You would go through these doors to go inside the inner temple. And they were overlaid with gold, golden doors. Now the inner room, the Holy of Holies, the special sanctified place, it was a 30-foot cube overlaid with pure gold. In this inner sanctuary were 2 cherubim of olive wood overlaid with gold, each 15 feet tall with 15-foot wingspans. Their wings were spread out so that a wing of one touched one wall and a wing of the other touched the other wall. And their wings touched each other in the middle. And the Ark of the Covenant rested between the 2 cherubim. And so if you can imagine, there are 2 massive carved cherubim, or what you would see inside this special room. A 3-level structure was built around the walls of the temple. The lower chamber was 7.5 feet wide. The middle chamber was 9 feet wide. And the upper chamber was 10.5 feet wide. And so the temple structure stood in the middle of a court with boundary walls. Outside the temple, within the court, you would find an altar of bronze for burnt offerings, 15 feet high, 30 feet long, 30 feet wide. The basin for washing was called the sea. Tells you how big it was. The sea, or the basin of cast metal, 7.5 feet high and 15 feet in diameter. And it held 12,000 gallons of water. Hear that again, 12,000 gallons of water. It was used for the priests to cleanse themselves. I got lost in my reading here. I'm sorry. It stood on 12 bronze oxen in sets of 3, facing in each direction. And then 10 bronze wheeled stands. You see them scattered throughout our picture there. There are 10 bronze wheeled stands, 6 feet long, 6 feet wide, 4.5 feet high, each of them supporting a large basin that was 4.5 feet in diameter, and it held 240 gallons of water for rinsing off whatever is used for the burnt offering. You're rinsing off your tools, or whatever got contaminated or dirtied. 5 stands were on the north side, 5 stands were on the south side. Now, it says in 1 Kings chapter 6, verse 11. Now the word of the Lord came to Solomon concerning this house that you are building. If you will walk in my statutes and obey my rules and keep all my commandments and walk in them, then I will establish my word with you, which I spoke to David your father, and I will dwell among the children of Israel and will not forsake my people Israel. I think this is an important promise to consider here, because God had promised the nation of Israel as they came out of Egypt. He made a promise to them in connection to the tabernacle, saying, I'm going to dwell with you there. I will dwell with you in the tent, and I will dwell among the people. I'll be your God, and you will be my people. And here he's making the same promise to Solomon, but he's making it regarding this new structure, this temple. And he's saying, if you stay with me, if you obey me, and you continue to walk in my commandments, I will be among you. I will be among you. I will dwell among the children of Israel and will not forsake you. I will be your God, and you will be my people. Same kind of promise found here in connection with the temple. Once the 7 years of construction was finished and the temple was finally built In 1 Kings chapter 8, there was a glorious celebration. Solomon blesses the Lord. Solomon offers his prayer of dedication, and then Solomon blesses the people, all within this chapter. And so he praises the Lord, he prays to the Lord, and it says in 1 Kings chapter 8 and verse 10, it says, "It happened that when the priest came out from the holy place, the cloud filled the house of the Lord, so that the priest could not stand and minister because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord filled the house of the Lord." And just a couple things here, just observe. We've gone through a lot of details. Thank you for working that through with me. I think one of the reasons the details are important is that they impress upon us. We're not there, we don't see it with our own eyes, but it impresses just the lengths that Solomon went to make sure that this temple represented the amazing, magnificent glory of God. How big it was, how covered with fine gold, how absolutely brilliant it would have seemed, how costly it would have been to the nation. Can you imagine building something like that today? How much it would cost to build something like that? How many workers it would take? How many hours to pour into it? But none of that compared. None of that compared to having the glory of the Lord, his presence among the people, and that all would have been reaffirmed when finally it was done and the dedication of this temple is taking place and the glory of the Lord comes and it is so bright, so brilliant they can't see. I mean, what an amazing affirming moment that God is here and he is pleased and he is with us. For the people, this is their way of doing something for the Lord. We want to reflect and show just how important this is to you. And really, it should have represented to the people just how amazing God is. I mean, the tabernacle is special enough to have an actual tent regulated specifically by God, the way it was to be designed. The fact it dwelt in the middle of the people and it always was where they were. But to have this temple in the capital city of God's people, of their nation in Israel, and to see it this way, to see its large structure, these grand walls, these golden fixtures, it just would have been an amazing and an impressive sight to see. But you know what's even more amazing than that? We get impressed with temples really often. We get impressed with big buildings, with large houses, with gold and silver and jewels. Those are the kind of things that impress us. But Solomon said here, 1 Kings 8, in the midst of this prayer of dedication, he says in 1 Kings chapter 8 and in verse 27, "Will God indeed dwell on the earth? Behold, heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain you. How much less this house which I have built?" He understood it. It's not that God needed a house. And I think that's something that they call it, a house for the Lord, this dwelling place of the Lord. He talked about this comfortable intimacy between God and man. But Solomon spoke it well. God doesn't need a house. God doesn't need a dwelling place. God didn't actually just contain himself to one building. God doesn't dwell in temples built by man. Stephen said so in his sermon in Acts 7 and verse 48. The Most High does not dwell in houses made by human hands. And Paul said it in Acts 17. He said, "The God who made the world and the things in it, since he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands. Neither is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all life and breath and all things." God doesn't dwell in temples built by hands. He dwells in heaven. His throne resides in heaven, and the earth is his footstool. God is everywhere. The temple was not giving God a place to live as if God was homeless. The temple was a way of continuing on this amazing theme of God desiring to dwell among his people, God among his chosen people. Just like the garden, just like the altars, just like the tabernacle, God made possible a way for for his presence to be there in a special and recognizable way among his people. And here it's seen through the temple, a place where they could draw near and bring their sacrifices to worship and honor him, a place where they could draw near and bring their intercession, their prayers before God through the incense, a place where the priest could come near, bringing the problems of the people, the issues and faults and sins of the people, seeking forgiveness and peace through God. It was just a place of communion between God and man. And so, no, it's not that God actually lived in that temple any more than God is everywhere. What the temple came to represent was the special place that God came to be, that God came to dwell with his people. I will be there, and there you can come and commune with me. But again, if you're going to draw near to God, a holy God, you yourself must be holy. This all will take on a greater meaning to us, I believe, when we get to the next few lessons, when God's presence departs from the temple. When the people allow this special, significant building to become something disdained, when they allow it to become contaminated by idolatry and sin, God chose this place to be where he would come and be among his people. But if his people are not going to listen to his laws and his commandments, he no longer will be in their midst. And without the Lord there no longer remains a confidence of victory, the assurance of a right standing, the blessed assurance of a strong future with God. Without God on our side, we are guaranteed to fail. And the people of Israel will come to see that shortly. But that's in a future lesson. This is all we have for us today. I hope that these details have impressed upon you how amazing this temple was. Try, if you can, to picture it in your own mind, to see it with your eyes. Imagine what it would be like to stand in its midst. Imagine what it would be like to be the priest who served inside that golden first room. Imagine what it would be like to be the high priest going in beyond the veil and seeing those towering cherubim and the ark resting in the middle. It's an amazing sight to see. Well, thank you so much for studying with me. Continue on. In our next class, we'll talk about what happens to this temple, what happens to God's people in relation to the temple, and what happens when God and his presence leaves the temple in the midst of his people. Have a wonderful day. I look forward to you studying again with us soon. Thank you.